welcome everybody to yet another show of Voices of Influence. Here today, we're talking about a topic that we all care about, like the idea of social selling and personal brand building, especially if you are an early stage entrepreneur or a solopreneur looking to, leverage LinkedIn and other social media for improving your brand presence and also like generating more leads for your business. This episode would have great nuggets for you to take away. So with that, let me introduce our guest speaker today, Chadd. Chadd is the CEO of Avrl, and he has been doing a great job in increasing his brand presence on LinkedIn. We're going to be talking a lot about this. Welcome to the show, Chadd.
Thank you. I appreciate having me.
Yeah, awesome. So let me start off with asking you about your journey starting this company. Tell us about this and what did it take for you to go from 0 to 1 with your company?
So my journey started in about 2017. My CTO and I launched Avrl, originally called Advanced Voice Research Labs. We had a little bit of a different strategy. We started the company with a customer. That customer was BMW. And when you start a company with that type of customer profile, it's a little bit different. But we were trying to focus on product and not bring on sales. And so I had to really kind of take an initiative as an engineer going in and try to figure out sales by myself. Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. So it's great that you had a customer, and especially a customer as big as BMW is amazing. And that journey of you starting as a founder, moving into sales must not have been easy. Tell us through what it was like to get those initial sales conversations going, landing your first set of prospects, even getting to open doors for you to first have those conversations must have all been very challenging as an engineer. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So I actually started on LinkedIn. I would literally just send out connection requests, trying to find people that fit the customer profile that we were trying to attack. And once I had them connected, not focusing on just driving communication, just trying to focus on creating content or literally creating conversation with my own posts. So we were just really forward at adopting that type of engagement rather than traditional sales. It kind of just spitball, just spiraled. And that's how we ended up driving most of our revenue. Comes from that type of social selling, not as much outbound sales.
This is very interesting. I mean, when you are talking about customers like BMW, your product should be in the high ACV range. This is not your $50 product or $100 product that you're trying to sell over here. So these are massive products. And you still decided that an inbound content-led strategy is a better fit for you than an outbound sales-led or go to conferences, meet people, wine and dine, talk to these people. Tell me a little bit more about why you chose this as opposed to the traditional sales approaches.
Yeah, traditional sales is interesting. I think with traditional software as a service type of sale, you try and find someone mid-tier in an organization and work your way up. What we found is that every time that we would try and do that, we would get blocked traditionally by IT. However, if I could engage with a business leader or some VP level or higher, and they could bring us in from the business, then they shove you through down past IT. We typically don't sell into IT as an organization. We try and sell into the commercial team. And our approach to that was that if we deploy a product that increases yield or reduces cost, we really should be focused on selling to the business group anyway. And so even though our average ACV is probably anywhere from 180,000 to 250,000, we still think that it's better to sell directly to the business rather than through commercial or through traditional strategy.
That is very interesting. So so much to unpack over here. Let's go from the beginning over here, right? So it looks like you decided to build a personal brand and target an audience and create content for them. Tell us a little bit more about that. Was that a conscious effort when you started this out, and what kind of content that you were thinking about posting? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So for anyone who follows me, I write really short form content that's a little bit provoking. That was just natural behavior for me. I had started to like write about things that I saw inside of the industry that I was working in that I didn't agree with or that I had strong feelings about. When I started to really like focus on doing it, that's when my following started to grow quite a bit. I think I probably have like 30,000 followers or something today on LinkedIn. But it's mostly just the moment that I'm feeling something, writing it, not proofing it. And it wasn't a strategy until about 2 years ago, when we really started to see that strategy play off. And I think a lot of times my sales team uses that in their messaging to like potential prospects today is like, hey, I work for Avrl. Someone will generally say like, oh, I think I know your CEO. I follow your CEO on LinkedIn.
Right.
And it really gives them credibility, like the moment that they pick up the phone to actually engage with us. It's been very interesting. I was not surprised. I was actually not trying to do that when
Right.
we started. Yeah.
That's right. So when you started writing content, obviously you wrote from your personal experience, your frustrations. It's more like a venting as much as like, that's kind of like I saw that like your initial style was more on the lines of like something provocative and something that is there. Were you targeting a specific demographic that might be interested in this, or was it more about the people who are similar to you? Like, what was the audience that you said should be interested in this content?
I think my approach is a little bit different. I don't write for any audience. I tend to typically write for myself, in what I'm feeling or trying to connect with, like my thought with maybe someone who might need it that day. I don't necessarily write for like this global level person or this like specific demographic. It's like I hope that anyone gets meaning from this right now.
That's interesting. So it's like you're writing to an audience of one, which is yourself. You're not like really worried about like who's going to read this and what they're going to do it. It's just unfiltered thoughts straight off the top of your head, which is interesting. And then why, any idea on like why people found this interesting?
I think that I work in transportation logistics most of my time. I think most of our contracts are in that space at this point. And there are a ton of politics in that industry. And I think generally people fear those politics, so they don't write about those things themselves. For some reason, I've really kind of found myself to fall outside of those politics. And so I want to kind of be that champion of speaking my mind or speaking what I think is truthful, regardless of the politics in that space.
Interesting. So people who were like, I can't do this, but I see someone else doing it, so I resonate with that so much that I need to follow this person and like comment on that and everything. Yeah. And when you started out, I think kind of jumping in this and like asking a little bit about like when the selling came in and like first to talk about like there are so many platforms. Looks like you picked LinkedIn as your choice of platform. Any specific thoughts that you gave on like why you chose that, or did you try other platforms and experiment with other ones as well?
I haven't tried any other platforms yet.
Okay.
My team's encouraged me to start to write on Twitter as well. I typically sell to CXO level, and when we looked at like direct targeting or directness of my reach into my network, we felt like LinkedIn was probably the best place for that content to exist. And it was just purely based off of that.
Got it. And so you're currently thinking about exploring other platforms, or is that something that is on the cards for you?
Yeah, I think probably sometime this year, I'll probably start writing on X. And I think that there's similar like business personas that are on that side as well. I don't know if my organization will ever be prolific writers on like Facebook or anything like that, from a social perspective, but I think something like X is probably definitely in the cards for us.
Got it. And then when it comes to like social selling, right? Like, so obviously you, in the initial days, at least you mentioned that like you never focused a bit on, I mean, you focused solely on like just writing your thoughts. Did that change at any point of time to like be where like let me solicit people to like bring them to my brand, or like did the types of posts change over time at all?
No, we don't. I've never written a post like about Avrl and what Avrl does. I think the closest thing that I've ever done to that is like, if we had like an outstanding quarter to like thank my team. We're really trying to drive a specific type of message. I'm trying to drive a specific type of message rather than the focus be on Avrl or the focus being on myself. I think that some companies and some brands get trapped into talking too much about their own product, that they lose momentum on what they're actually trying to achieve. I'm trying to avoid that from happening.
So your strategy would be to like keep this ask and soliciting just completely outside, and then like just focus completely on like your authentic content to like shine through, and then people are going to eventually like resonate with that you are a part of this brand. You don't really need to make that connection for them, and that's your idea to it, which is just kind of very interesting. Um, and tell me a little bit more about like, it's like just getting started, right? Like you mentioned what your initial days were like, and maybe if someone else comes and asks you that, like, it's like, hey, I want to repeat what you did. And if someone's getting started with brand building, what would you suggest is the first thing that they should do? And here, like, we're talking about somebody who does not have a big brand, maybe have a brief, like a small network and like, brief conversations that they've had with like some people who are interested in their content. That's pretty much it. What would you suggest?
I'm actually going through this topic right now with one of my employees. Her name is Madison, and she's on my growth team. And she wants to start communicating more prolifically online about her thoughts. And my number one objective for her was that you have to really separate your thought from work. And so, like, her number one goal in this is like she needs to leave her desk for 2 hours a week at one block and go and sit by her pool and just like write or read and actually dictate what she's feeling. And I think that if you really want authentic content, you can't just be like working on something and then maybe like have a thought and jot it down. I really think that it needs to be like stimulated by like actual thought or something that you read and then write it down. A lot of times what I do specifically is I will like read something or see something and I jot it down in a notebook, but I don't write my post that moment. But when I'm like looking every morning on what to post or in the afternoon what to post, I'll flip through that book and something will typically like spark me in that feeling and I'll write that post in real time and post it.
Got it. No, this is great. And I want to dig a lot more into your process because I actually care a lot about the whole habits and systems thinking that goes on into this. But like before that, like just for people who are getting started, like wanted to understand a bit more about like the topics that they should be thinking about, right? Because there's obviously like just things that are on top of mind for me. And like it might be just like very like, for example, like I care about habits and behavior change and everything, which is not like very related to my brand or like my company. Would you say that like when you are like thinking about topics to post, should that have like some relevance to the brand that your company's brand, and like how much of an overlap there should be at least?
Interesting. I think that it should be something that someone's passionate about. I happen to be very passionate about my organization. And so
Right.
My organization sells automation, like web-based automation, and it helps companies like reduce cost and then maximize yield. And so like I tend to sometimes write topics that like focus on the end state or our objective of what we're trying to achieve, not the process in which we're going to do, or that a like 3PL or a carrier or someone in transportation needs to deploy this to stay ahead. But I would say that someone probably should be finding some type of relationship between like their actual thought process and what they're trying to promote in their messaging.
Right.
Definitely.
Got it. So it can't be very orthogonal. It has to be an overlap, but it may not be directly talking about the things that you're building, as long as there is like that overlap. And I think you mentioned one point there where like you are very passionate about this. And so tell me a bit more about that. Like what kind of topics should I pick so that I am going to have like a wealth of information that I'm available in my head to be able to like pour into like content over there? how do you choose those topics so that you can continuously write on those topics?
I don't know how to answer that. I think I read like a lot, probably more than most people that I know. And when I'm reading, I tend to have a notebook and I'll write down a statement or a comment or a topic. And part of that ritual that I go through is probably more associated with what I'm feeling that day. I'd say that I'm not having a good morning. My topic's probably going to be tied to something that's a little bit more emotional. And so I think that where some founders or where some like influencers will get like in trouble is they'll write their posts and schedule them out, and they could schedule them out for weeks or months, but it like tends to not be as authentic of a feeling when you're reading it. My whole goal is that someone feels some type of emotion when they're reading my post. And the only way for me to really like feel that is that I probably need to be emotional when I'm writing it. Which is why
that is interesting.
Yeah, which is why I tend to like not write until the moment that I'm going to post it.
It's interesting. So it's almost like you're you're trying to like keep that emotional state when you are like writing your content, and that actually like goes into your post, and like somehow the audience have to feel that same emotion as well. This is interesting. So and you say you write and you say you jot down, and this is part of your process. Have you considered like more visual mediums like a video or like photos, or like did you choose to like always be like using like writing as the way that you convey your emotions?
I haven't tried video yet. I probably will end up doing video. That's a really big commitment, right? And so you have to have enough time in the day, and you want that content to be really well done. And so that's why I haven't gone into it yet. And then from a visual perspective, I will sometimes if it makes sense. There's been this really unique movement on LinkedIn recently within my network where like CEOs are posting that they'll sit in the middle seat on an airplane so that they can meet other individuals and use it as a networking event. And I like am so against that. I did post a picture of myself sitting in a middle seat, but it was because I had a canceled flight out of Indiana and I had to wake up at like 4 a.m. to get the only flight that I could get on the back to Austin, and so I will if I think that it makes like sense, but a lot of times I won't.
Got it. So you're definitely exploring video as well. I think we discussed a lot about tactics and their process for producing content. So, but I want to maybe dig in a little bit more deeper into this exact thing. And you mentioned that you encourage people to like maybe take 2 hours a week at a specific time to go into that zone of being away from your desk and thinking about this. Walk us a little bit more towards why that thinking. Why should they step away, and like what it would take for them to create content in a different place than like at their work?
Yeah, I think that what tends to happen is that someone gets distracted when they're like on their computer or they're working on something else. And I really think that if you want to write good content as a behavior, excuse me, I'm gonna cough. You probably need to create some separation until it becomes a habit. And so I think that part of my reasoning for suggesting to Madison that she like steps away and goes and sits by her pool or goes to a coffee shop is to start to form a habit about being really focused on writing on that content or finding those things that are important to you. I think as you get like further along, like for me, I don't need to do that. I could probably read something and be like, that's exactly like perfect. Or, this weekend I was in Napa with some friends, one of them starting a company, and his parents were like devastated that he's leaving his job because it's too risky, but he hates his job at the same time. And maybe I want to write about, some people wouldn't have no problem with you just like hating life and would rather see you do that because it's safer than creating your own company. And so a lot of times, like it might be a conversation that I have with someone that drives the topic that I'm going to write about.
Got it. And I really like that idea that you mentioned about like a habit that you build. one of the biggest pushbacks that I get when I talk to people and like talk to them about like personal brand building and as a founder, they should be doing this is like, who has time for that? And so when you are to like answer that, like there's just so much going on. I'm like sort of wearing the hat of a product guy, and then there's operations stuff, and then there's hiring, and there's everything going on. How do you dedicate time to like content when it feels like that's a fringe activity? So how would you like answer that question when someone tells them that like maybe it's not a priority for me?
It's so interesting. I don't have children yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have probably 4 hours extra in the evening that someone wouldn't have if they wanted to spend time with their family.
Mm,
And so I tend to spend my evening as my like time to create content, or like my time to create the thoughts that will create my content. And so I think that it does become more challenging as like more complex your life gets.
right.
However, I do believe that with my own organization, a lot of our revenue is driven from my content, whether that's even the
Right.
connection that we make with the customer. And I would actually say that that's been the biggest change in my business, is that when I actually started to focus on creating content, then our uh, cost for like sale, like cost like to
Yeah.
acquire a new customer, went way down. And so I would recommend that it is worth it. It's kind of a grind, right? Like it's
Yeah.
weeks and weeks and weeks, or months and months and months of writing with no traction. But if you stay consistent with it, it's something that can really pay, like I think really pay for itself.
Yeah. So this is like it's kind of like compounding, right? Like initial savings don't like yield as much, and like you're like obviously investing in it and like believing that this is eventually going to pay, and then you're like spending the time on it. At what point of time did you feel like, hey, this is a priority, this is a marketing technique and a priority for our company, and so I should be spending time on this, rather than like, hey, I do this on the side when I'm not having, I mean, like I'm kind of stealing time away from my life to do this. Like when did that shift happen for you? After like you gained some traction, or like what made you feel like, you know, you this has to be a strategy?
I think when we got our first inbound lead from someone saying like,
Mm,
"Hey, I saw your CEO write XYZ online. I'd love to set up some time." Once we started to see like actual momentum, that's when we were like, "Oh man, this is like a really good idea for us." It's kind of like that like model of like it's really hard to go to the gym and work
right.
out until you start to see like muscle definition, or you start to see like weight loss. Then it becomes much more. It's
Right.
more easy to have it be a habit, right?
I really like that analogy. Like the first time you see like something move, whether it is your weighing
Yeah.
scale or like your physical like things, when you see that move is when like you get that feeling that like, okay, this should be a priority, and like you need to like start investing in this. And tell me a bit more about like your process right now. And you said like the tools that you use for like doing this. You write down things on a paper. It seems very lightweight right now, and I'm just kind of curious. Like you write down things on paper, and then when you're like whenever you get a chance, you're like as emotional as you are when you are like jotting that down, write down that topic, and then like post it immediately. Is that your typical workflow?
Yeah, my typical workflow is I have a notebook that's like literally right by my desk. And if
Mm,
throughout the day, if I'm feeling something or I see something that irritates me or makes me excited or makes me feel something, I'll write the topic down, just like
yeah.
probably like a bullet, 2 or 3 words. And then later in the morning when I typically post, I'll go back through and I have like months of these thoughts, and I'll
Right.
find one that really resonates with me that morning and I'll post it.
Yeah, and in some sense, like you seem like you're, you know, able to like write content and immediately post it. There are a lot of people who have like these demons in their head saying that like, oh, this content is not good enough, or like, you know, maybe this one is not going to perform well, and like I'm kind of conscious of that. Like, what is your thought process on that?
It's so funny. So some of my content that gets the least amount of attention online makes the biggest impact because people will text me. And
Mm,
those are the ones that I really know that I nailed. Is like it might be a flop online and it gets like 5 or 6 likes, but I get
mm,
15 text messages or emails saying like, "Oh my gosh, that was like spot on." And I
mm,
think that sometimes with social media, people are afraid to like, because then people will associate them liking that with that mentality or that process. And so I really believe that anyone who wants to write on LinkedIn probably should be writing for themselves or their own thoughts rather than trying to get likes completely.
So your your metrics that you're tracking are the more like the lagging indicators of am I getting a sale, or like someone actually like resonating with this, and like is this like an inbound lead, rather than like, you know, likes or comments, which are more like vanity metrics that you're not tracking. Is that accurate?
Or even like immediate connection, right? Like I might have a non-customer that I'll probably never work with, but someone that I respect in the industry write me and tell me that that thought was great. They can't publicly like it, or they can't publicly like share that opinion. Those like connections, because that's like a human to human connection that like came from or resonated out of a post. I think that those are the biggest wins.
Got it. One other question on the tone of posts, right? I think you write as you are. You know, like when it comes to like, this is what I emotionally feel, and I'm going to write this. I'm as authentic as possible. There are very different types of people, and I don't know, like, you know, it's like the person in your company that was like starting to write this, like maybe they are not as forthright about their opinions. They are more like you know, curious, or like more they just want to suggest some ideas or something like that. What kind of tones do you know have worked in the past? Have you tried to shift that for yourself, or when you're talking to other people, would you rather tell them that they try a tone that might work, or like try something that's more authentic to who they
are? So LinkedIn changes its algorithm pretty prolifically, obviously, to try and weed out people who aren't consistent and aren't building like a following. I've had some people call me after I have a post that gets like, you know, 800 likes and, you know, 100 comments. Like, you must have like figured out like exactly how LinkedIn is like using their algorithm now. And I don't feel like I try and chase that. I feel like I do like to write the opinion of someone who people would be afraid to write that same type of sentiment into the market. Like I try and be that person that like not very many other people would take the like positioning of being that person or standing up that much for something. I like that position for me, and I like that position for my company. My company is trying to be almost like an exclusive technology provider. Well, if you're going to be an exclusive technology provider, you better have like pretty exclusive ideas and pretty exclusive thoughts behind the reasoning why you're going to do something. And that's how I really want to be like perceived in the market. And I'm trying to match the same tone of the organization that I'm trying to build.
Yeah, it looks like you're kind of building a culture around this for both your company as well as like the tone, and everything is part of that culture, which is that forthright, like be bold with your thoughts, and like, you know, express yourself as to what you feel, like, you know, be fearless about that. And I really like that. But would you also like recommend that like there are probably other types of tones that might work as well? Like have you seen other things that have worked for other people, or in this you know, on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think that there's a huge opportunity for someone to be like the people's champion that like wants to like be there to promote like positivity towards humanity. And that could be like as global as you want or as niche as you want, you know? I think that for us, when I look at like where I think there's opportunity in my market is that like freight technology traditionally has been like 30, 40, 50 years behind. I think that there's a really unique opportunity for someone to be a company that's pulling them into the future, or even that they're not there to sell them snake oil, you know? And I think in a lot of industries that are like old and established, you had, you know, a truck driver that wanted to create a tech company. He's non-technical. He's going to create technology. Well, that actually might hold the entire industry back. Maybe we need to be talking about topics like that. and so I think like it can be topic oriented. I think that it doesn't have to be this like message like specifically. I think it can be topic to topic to topic, the way that you
Right.
change your clothing.
Right. No, yeah, that's actually really interesting. Um, no, I think we've gotten a lot out of this, and I can keep asking you so many things, and you have very good ideas over here. But I'm gonna like finish off with one question for you, which is more like a this or that. When it comes to like for social media posts, what would you recommend? Is like one post every day with like 70% quality, as opposed to like one post every 2 weeks with 100% quality? I know that there's probably like a in between that you would like, but if you were to choose between this or that, what would you choose?
I think you have to go one post every day with 70% quality, as I think that consistency is what like creates momentum. I
Mm.
think that if you're posting every 2 weeks, if you forget a week, then it's a month, and then you only post it 11 times in that year. And so I would say that, you really need to like be a little bit more consistent with it.
This is awesome. Yeah, I think like I want to ask one last question about like just this consistency part of it. Is when it comes to like posting content like multiple times a day, multiple times a week, where did you land at, and like how has that changed over time for you?
I typically try and post with the people that I believe will resonate with my posts. I usually post around like 7 a.m., which is
Mm,
not, I don't think, a popular time for people to be posting content. But I think that the people that I'm trying to address would probably check social media earlier in the morning before they start like
mm,
their day. And so I'm trying to post around that time. However, I've watched my like friend open their laptop and go to LinkedIn, and my post from 2 days ago is at the top of their feed. And so I
mm.
don't know. I don't know if it really matters as much as everyone thinks, especially if you're writing really clear content that can gain a little bit of traction. And I don't even mean like likes, but I mean like actual like visibility on it or impressions on it. I think that it doesn't matter as much when you're posting. I always thought that it
Right.
would.
Right. No, yeah. No, this is with how much LinkedIn is changing the algorithm. This is something that I've been hearing all along. Is that like, don't try to game like when you post and like what it is. Just like post when you can, and then like it, eventually it'll all like figure out. Is what I've been hearing as well. Chad, this is a pleasure talking to you. I think I've had like so many different topics that we've jumped through, and like you've given me your authentic viewpoint on this, and it's also like many tips that someone who's starting out can take from. Appreciate your time. Appreciate all your thoughts. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much.